Feels like we're just repeating ourselves at this point, but an unbelievable season of home games for Duke basketball inside Cameron Indoor Stadium. What a run they've been on through the ACC. Hopefully they got one more game in them to take down Carolina coming up on Saturday. And then, of course, it's tournament time. The most important goal still on the table. Let's see if this Duke basketball team can go win it all and be national champions.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So excited to have you here with us today on Wednesday, March 5th, 2025, as Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics with a particular focus this time of year as to what's happening with this Duke basketball team, the run that they're on after another impressive victory over Wake Forest on Monday night. The Blue Devils now have 18 regular season wins in the ACC. They go for number 19 on Saturday when they will take on the North Carolina Tar Heels. On today's show, Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated is here to chop it up with us. We'll talk about Monday's win. We'll talk about Carolina game coming up on Saturday, and so much more. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Spread the word about this podcast. Always want to continue growing our listening audience. That's really, really important to us. But in addition to that, we're also available for free each and every day on YouTube. You can follow us, Locked On Blue Devils. Subscribe to the channel there on YouTube. Like this video. Share it with your friends. And we're on X at LO_Blue Devils. Conor O'Neill is here with us once again, and we are talking about the victory over Wake Forest on Monday night, a game in which it was the slowest start offensively we've seen from Duke pretty much this entire season. Took them nearly 3.5-4 minutes to find themselves on the scoreboard. It's tied at 2 at the first media timeout. Just a strange start to the game. And yet, Conor, you look at the scoreboard when the night came to a close, and 93 points were hung up there once again for Duke, 53 of them in the second half. What'd you see from that game from Duke?
Yeah, it's a nice luxury when you can spend the first 5 minutes missing a lot of open shots. I mean, they weren't taking bad shots. They weren't turning the ball over all that much. They might have had 1 or 2 there in the first 5 minutes, but I can remember off the top of my head 2 just wide open Sion James threes. I think both right in front of Wake's bench, or maybe one in the corner, one on the wing. They're good shots. You just, sometimes you miss good shots too. Good Lord. I mean, they're a machine. This is a team that, 37 days prior, Duke slugged it out in a 63-56 game. Obviously, the location matters a little bit, going from Winston to Durham. But in my estimation, it shouldn't be 26 points of a difference. Yeah. This Duke team is getting better, and that might be among the many things that can be said. That might be the scariest thing to say about them right now. They're a team that has been at or near the top of the sport for basically the whole season, and they've still found ways to improve themselves. They're still finding ways to speed things up without making mistakes. They're just, it's pretty incredible to see the growth from a team that didn't need to grow. This team would have been fine if they had been playing, if they were playing the same version of basketball they were playing in December and January, they'd still be in a really, really advantageous position going into March. They've gotten even better, though. That's the thing that I just can't wrap my head around, or I guess I can. I just am amazed by the fact that they've been able to actually do it.
Yeah, and here they are now 30 games into the season, 27-3 overall on the year, 18-1 in league play. And to your point, they do continue to improve, and hopefully they've got a big run in front of them. Hopefully they win 6 games in the NCAA tournament and they can crown themselves champions when it's all said and done. So that's obviously still the big goal at large here. Post-game, I found it interesting that Steve Forbes, the Wake Forest head coach, is kind of noting the pace of play that Duke's got. And then a very interesting comment from Coach Scheyer as well, kind of looking back into that first game, and felt like he was not a fan of even having to go back and watch that 63-56 game, considering how slow Duke has played in that game in particular. I found that very interesting, man, because obviously you watch this Duke team over the last few games. They're scoring 90 plus, which means you got to find yourselves in a position to create all of these extra possessions by pushing pace a little bit. And seems like that's really going to be an emphasis for Duke down the stretch as they get into March.
Yeah, so I brought this up. The Illinois game was the first game since the first 3 games of the year that was over 70 possessions, and that's tracked by Ken Palm. I think we talked about this last week. Yeah. So they went, the first 3 games were all over 70. The next 23, so Auburn at Louisville, the blowout of Pitt, like the narrow wins against Wake and State at Wake and home against State, all of those games, 23 straight, under 70 possessions. Duke's last 4 games, they've all been 70 or more. Last night was 70, meaning Monday night. And then the 3 before were like, I think one was 73 and the other 2 were 71. Wow. So playing faster. And I brought this up with John after the Illinois game, just kind of fishing for something, because I thought it was so weird that they had played so many games under 70 and they finally played an Illinois team. And I just kind of chalked it up to they played out of conference. Illinois missed a ton of threes and sent guys to the offensive glass. So when you do that, and when you shoot a 3, the ball pops out further. If Sion or ends with a head of seam going to the other side of the court, that's a fast break right there. But now they're playing fast against the ACC teams that they've already played this year, right? They played fast against Miami. They played fast against Wake. It's just that's another wrinkle to their growth. John said it was a priority for them to play faster, while acknowledging that teams want to slow it down against them, because sometimes you get into that football brain set of the fewer possessions, the better chance a team with lesser talent has to win.
Yeah.
Clearly, every team Duke plays until they're in San Antonio is going to have lesser talent than they do. So they've been running into it, and now they've found a way to, even playing these types of teams, turn up the pace and keep running. And John was, I don't think he was on the verge of throwing up, but he was pissed watching back the first Wake game and watching how slow Duke was. And so it's been a point of emphasis, like John, to use John's word, it's been a priority for them. And the way this team has been coached all year is, if John says they want to do something and something is a priority, you can kind of count on them applying it.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be implemented. It's not something that John is going to talk about for 2 months that they haven't been able to do. We saw that with the offensive rebounding numbers. They were really mad at themselves for giving up a lot of offensive rebounds and haven't been hurt that much on the offensive glass, as far as without looking at the numbers, as far as I know. It's a special team.
I'm going to be curious then how that kind of translates to Saturday's game against North Carolina, because they scored 87 points in the first meeting against the Tar Heels. You mentioned kind of Miami and Wake Forest coming back around. Could that be something that Duke looks to implement, picking up a win in Chapel Hill? So we'll continue to have these conversations and looking at the game against Wake Forest, kind of talking about the season at large for Duke basketball and more after we take our first break here on today's show. Our show today is brought to you by our friends at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Do you need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com. duke.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Supply House is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, we keep going here with Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. We're talking about the Duke basketball victory that they had over Wake Forest the other night, a game in which Mason Gillis and Sion James were recognized as scholarship seniors coming over as grad transfers, and both finished with 11 points in their final game played inside Cameron Indoor. Both were some of the guys in double figures for Duke. What did it, when you got to chat with those guys or just hear some of the things that they said and their speeches and that sort of thing, Conor, what do you feel like Duke meant to them, knowing that they had these long careers at other schools and getting to be a part of the Blue Devils this year?
Yeah, I mean, to start with Sion, it goes back to the quote I asked him on Saturday night that got a lot of viral play, got a lot of people fired up on Twitter about he felt like he had just gotten to Duke and it's already over. Obviously, the season's not over, but you get what I'm saying. And he said he's loved every minute of it. And that's a guy that this is where you can appreciate them coming from different backgrounds. Like Mason Gillis had a very different college experience prior to Duke than Sion James did. And both of them have had very different college experiences compared to what Malik Brown saw at Syracuse. Mason, I'm just so interested and intrigued to get to talk to him a little more in NCAA tournament time because I honestly haven't talked to him that much this year. There have been times that, he didn't play as many minutes and wasn't in the locker room when we all filtered in there. But I go back to what he said on the court. I mean, he's clearly aware of, he wants this to be number 6. He told us in the preseason, and I've wanted to, the way this works in my mind is you store up these story ideas for NCAA tournament time when you're going to need to have some fresh content filter up and get out there. There are a lot of people on this team that grew up Duke fans. Cooper Flagg grew up a Duke fan. I believe Darren Harris did. Mason Gillis told us all about how he grew up a Duke fan. Kaman told us not that he grew up a Duke fan, but that he, the quote from the preseason about his little cousins, they understood when he told them that he was going to the same school as Zion. That was the, transcendent college season that he had. So I want to get to talk to Mason and see, just gauge what he feels about, having this type of role. It's not the biggest role. It's not as big a role as he had at Purdue for a team that was runner-up for the national championship. But he has embraced the role, and he plays it to a T. And sure enough, when Duke is on the verge of putting the game against Wake Forest away, he comes in and strokes 2 3-pointers to make it a 24-point game and force a timeout call from Steve Forbes, and 11 minutes left, and it's all academic from there. I mean, the rest of the game was a formality. So, like, these guys, I've said this on the board a couple times. I hope people understand 2 parts to the transfer portal. Now that Duke is kind of a transfer portal school, seeing what these 3 have done. They're not the first 3 transfers to Duke, but these 3 are going to be judged a little differently than Ryan Young and Jake Grandison, all due respect to those guys. You're never going to find a Sion James clone like that. He's a unique player. Mason Gillis is a unique player. Obviously, Malik Brown is a unique player, and they have Malik next year as long as he doesn't unexpectedly transfer at this point. You're going to be able to find talented players every year, though. And that's where you have to have faith that because Duke did it this year, they're going to be able to do it again and find some ready-made replacements. They're not going to do everything as well as Mason and Sion, but they could do some other things better than those guys do them. So, yeah, I guess that's where I'm sounding off on looking ahead to next year already.
Yeah, no, I mean, everybody wants to do it when you get to a point where, you're being recognized for your last game at Cameron Indoor, and then there's no way really to recognize these freshmen who are bound to head to the NBA after one season. But, it's like we're sitting there, and this is Cooper Flagg and Knueppel and all these guys that are projected to be top picks. You would expect they're heading off to the league after a season like this. And now, what does it look like for them reflecting back on the one season that they had at Duke and games being played inside Cameron Indoor? Another 30-plus point victory as they win by 33. We kind of mentioned the slower start that they had against Wake Forest. Looking inside the box score here, you got 19 assists on 34 made baskets, 14 three-pointers after, being less than your average, 8 against Florida State on Saturday night. Duke finishes with 38 points in the paint. I thought they did a good job getting out and running when the opportunities presented themselves. What are some of those offensive numbers that stand out to you that led them to be so successful with those 53 second half points?
It's the numbers that accompany where they beat Wake in the margins, like all the controllables, like all the effort numbers. Second chance points, I think, was like 22-4 or 6.
Wow. Yeah.
Fast breaks, I know, was 20-6. Points off turnovers was 23-4. So Wake committed, I think it was 15 turnovers, turned into 23 points for Duke. That tells you they were really efficient in turning their mistakes into Duke points. And then Duke committed 10. Like it's, Knueppel with 4 is pretty high for him. Mm-hmm. Those only turned into 4 points. So it seems obvious, but it really can make the difference in, a 20-point win becoming a 33-point win when you're able to take advantage of your opponent's mistakes, and then your mistakes don't become that advantageous for your opponent. And that's where points off turnovers comes in. I think points in the paint also was like 38-20. And that's a huge number because, look, I cover Wake Forest also. They don't make threes. Like, they made 6 in this game. They had made 7 in the previous 3 games combined. It was like 2, 2, and 3. They just don't shoot from the outside. So if they're not scoring on you in the paint, they're not scoring on you.
Right.
It's really that simple. And of those 6 threes they made, 2 of them were in the last 2 minutes and change. I mean, my guys Spencer and Stanley both got dotted in the eyes on threes, and I was feeling for them. But yeah. I mean, it like that points in the paint number is a big one for Wake Forest to win. And the fact that Duke beat them by 18 and then also banged 14 threes on Wake, that's just, you could tell me those things and not tell me anything else about the rest of the game, and I would say Duke won this game by at least 25.
Yeah, no, I mean, Duke did what they needed to do to get the job done, and the walk-ons getting a chance to play there at the end was incredible. Really wanted Stanley Borden to find himself in the
I was
score
crushed.
column at the
He took
end,
that
man.
one fadeaway, fall away. I thought I had a perfect angle on it too. It was online. It was just short.
Yeah, and Duke's going to dribble it out up 33, but when you get the ball back with 15 seconds, party is just like, run something for Stanley, man. Get up the floor, cherry pick if you have to, get in the score column. So, oh man. But all right, so Cooper Flagg, 28 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals. That's a lot, Connor. That's a lot of things that he did against Wake Forest. What a way to go out, Cameron.
Yeah, I was getting nudged there by Brendan Marks and Rod Baxley because I've been on the Cooper Flagg is going to have a triple-double this season train since the preseason, and he still hasn't gotten it. And there was a point in the second half where he got subbed out. I want to say there were about 8 or 9 minutes left. So you felt like he was going to come back in because John was going to get him one more chance to come off the court.
Right.
And sure enough, he goes back in there and like got a rebound to get him to 23, 7 and 7 or something like that. And they're kind of nudging me like he's close. And I was just like, number one, I'm not tweeting anything about it because when I've done that, it's just jinxed it. Like when I put the halftime numbers out there, there have been a couple games where it'd be like 12 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. And he's finished the game with 5 assists. He's gone a second half without getting any assists.
He goes into score mode.
Right. And that's the That's, this is the ultimate old man yells at cloud thing, but that's the problem with a generational player who does everything within the game to help his team win and not stat chase and not be out there looking to cherry pick some rebounds or some cheap assists, like going to the basket and scoring when he could be throwing up a lot. But anyway, I just look, he is generational. I'm 35 and I've been paying attention to college basketball for a long time. Not all 35 of those years, obviously. I like to think I started paying attention around 99 or 2000. He's the best all-around player I've ever seen. So 25 years in person, I'm talking. He's the best one I've ever seen. He affects the game in every possible and conceivable way. He's an ultimate teammate. If you watch him out there, the camera probably doesn't catch it all the time, but when he's at the top of the key running point forward and he's throwing even on the hockey assist plays, he's hyping guys up on the transition back to defense while he's making sure everybody's lined up. He's been everything and more that Duke could have asked for in bringing him to Durham. And look, the one more year chant was fun. It's a nice fever dream, fantasy, whatever you want to call it. He's not coming back. He's going to be a number 1 overall pick. He's going to be on a max contract by the time he's like 22 years old. And at this point, I don't know how you can look at what he does in college and say that's not going to translate in the NBA. Like, his shot will improve because everybody's shot improves when they go become a professional. Indeed. And he does everything else to an elite level.
We're going to miss him for sure with those games inside Cameron and just getting hype with the crazies around him. And feels like he flexes more frequently than we've seen players do in quite some time, as he deserves to do that. I mean, he's that good. He wants to show it off a little bit. I loved the one more year. It kind of looked like he was saying run it back or something of those sorts as well, kind of playing to it. Like, that just speaks to his personality a little bit. And you can tell this is an 18-year-old who's having a blast. And it's just basketball at the end of the day. Why not have some fun while you're doing it?
Yeah, I have zero doubt that this has been the most fun year Cooper has had playing basketball. Now, we had a little bit of joking in the media room afterward that his team has lost 3 more games than Mount Verde did last year. So from that standpoint, maybe it's not
year for us. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know what else to say about him other than he's a generational talent. He's going to change whatever NBA franchise he goes to. And it's really hard for me to see him not living up to the hype.
Yeah.
Because he's already met the hype. Like, this season was hyped, and he's risen and exceeded expectations.
Shout out to you, Cooper Flagg. Keep the wins coming. I know the Chapel Hill crowd is going to love to welcome you in to the Dean Dome on Saturday. So we'll get set for that one and wrap up today's episode after we take this last time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and first watch today. For your second listen, do make sure that you go check out the Locked On College Basketball Show with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for the March Madness tournament to get started. Go ahead and do it now. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. And Duke runs college basketball, so you know that they're talking all about them over on Locked On College Basketball. I really do think you'll enjoy that show. So go and find it on YouTube or wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. Also be on the lookout for the Locked On ACC. We put up the Locked On ACC squad shows in your feeds here with Locked On Blue Devils each and every Thursday. Really excited to join my counterparts from across the conference talking about everything going on in the ACC. Go check all of that out and more here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated is here with us. We're talking about the end of the year for Duke here in the regular season. 1 game left to go. Now they'll head across town to take on the North Carolina Tar Heels inside the Dean Dome on Saturday. We always talk about throwing the records out of it. It's a game that you never really know what to expect. Thought that would be the case for the first meeting against North Carolina earlier this season, and Duke ends up winning by 17. They lead by 30-plus at one point in the game. I hope that we're still headed for something similar come Saturday, but I can't help to have these feelings, Connor, that this might be the one, that North Carolina is fighting for their NCAA tournament lives. It is a tough building to play in. North Carolina, shocker, hates Duke. That fan base wants to do everything possible to make it tough on these guys. I'm excited to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game because I don't know if there's ever going to be a Carolina-Duke game that's not interesting.
Yeah.
I do feel the same way. I was telling people both before and after the game against Wake Forest, if they wanted to know what I thought about it, and it's like there was a bad matchup for Wake Forest. I think Duke is a bad matchup for Carolina. I think that's less the case if they're playing Jalen Withers as much as they have been. He's come on strong, and if he's making corner threes, then they're a little bit of a different team. It's hard to remove the venue of it. It's hard to separate the things that Duke did to Carolina and Cameron and think they're not going to be able to do the same things.
Yep.
This is the number of possessions is something I'm going to be paying a keen eye toward because Carolina plays fast. And I went into the first game thinking the pace of this game is going to determine who wins it. And it was a 65 possession game. And Duke scored 87 points and Carolina scored 70 and scored 70 because they scored a ton of points late. And by virtue of that became one of the only teams this year that scored more than 1.0 points per possession against Duke. So if Duke's able to play as fast as Carolina wants to, and as Duke has been playing, this is a team that scored 400 points in their last 4 games. I don't know how that stops happening. I'm not expecting to go in there and then put up triple digits, but they could very well go in there and score another boatload of points and make it a game where, first to 100 wins.
Yeah, and so many people are going to be watching it. We've got the college game day dynamic with a game like this. You've got all the eyeballs on Cooper Flagg and how the spotlight inside that building, what type of a play and impact he's going to be able to make. Knueppel, can he continue to make shots from the outside and set the tone offensively for Duke? And then what do you get out of Proctor and Isaiah Evans offensively? I think those are kind of my big offensive questions then that I would have for Duke.
I would say Isaiah Evans really enjoys playing in front of his home crowd. He likes firing up the crazies. This is a game for him. Yes. Like ACC road games, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I need to do some research before Saturday's game, but I think he's shooting close to 50% on threes in ACC road games. And that's why Duke is 8-1 in ACC road games this year. Don't forget, he also hit a big one down at Clemson, and the one that Duke lost in the midst of the Cooper Flagg late flurry in the last few minutes. So Isaiah Evans is one that I would peg as somebody to watch. And if he comes in and hits that first one, he's going to hit 2 or 3 more. You hope that he doesn't have any heat checks like the one that he took early in the first half against Wake.
Sure.
He was anticipating a foul call, obviously. But that's one. I think Common Malawach is going to be rewarded for playing the way he has been. He had 4 points against Wake and 14 rebounds. So I kept waiting for him to score some buckets so he could get a 6th double-double of the season, and those weren't coming, but he was just grabbing the ball and throwing it back out for a 3-pointer. That's going to be a pretty big part of this game too.
All right, we'll see how it unfolds. Saturday night, going to be a good one. Connor, tell us about your website and how people can be involved.
Devils Illustrated is duke.rivals.com. We're going to have so much stuff up there in the next month or so. I mean, this is the best time of the year to subscribe. And if you want to pop over and just click on the free articles, that's fine. No judgment here, but I really hope people subscribe and become premium members. It's only about $8.33 a month. I think it's worth it to be educated about your team and read some cool stories about Duke.
No doubt. No doubt. Couldn't recommend it enough. Connor, it's always great to see you, man. We'll talk again next week, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Conor O'Neill. He's joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Always appreciate his time joining me here on the program for all his thoughts and insight regarding the Duke basketball team. Big one coming up against North Carolina on Saturday. Plenty more episodes coming your way to break it all down. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.